Welcome to the WJBM Outdoors Show, brought to you by Midwest Tractor Sales in Jerseyville. We're coming to you from the WJBM studios in Jerseyville, the voice of the Tri-Counties. I'm Aaron Quillen. I operate Monarch Rivers, where the mission is simple: kill big deer. Today joining us, we have Mr. Rich Portwood. Thank you for being here, Rich.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. When you reached out and mentioned that you were on the board of directors for the Illinois State Rifle Association, what a great fit.
Well, I am the newest member, and so I'm trying to find my spot, so to speak, on the board.
Yes, sir.
And just trying to figure out what I can do to help the organization.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about what the Illinois State Rifle Association is.
Okay, so we are the biggest and oldest 2A advocacy group in Illinois.
Okay.
So we have a lot of training programs. We have a lot of education. But our main focus is trying to advocate for the 2A community here.
Okay. And then is this a lobbyist organization, obviously?
Well, yeah, we employ a couple lobbyists on behalf of all the gun owners here in Illinois, and just try to advocate for their rights.
That's awesome. And then is there a membership basis? How does this work?
Yeah. It's a little like the NRA or Gun Owners of America. If you want to buy a 1-year membership, you can buy a 3-year membership. I have a life membership where I just paid one time and I'm good for the rest of my life, but
efficiency.
You've got those other levels where, you can become like a benefactor member. I'm a benefactor member of the NRA, so you have different levels. You also have like military or law enforcement type of memberships. So we try to, cater to everybody if we can. Absolutely.
Well, we see in Illinois, there's a big disparity between North and South in terms of, you got Chicago, and then it seems like the rest is downstate. And 2A seems to be a particular issue where, the two sides don't necessarily see eye to eye.
Yeah.
It would kind of point to an absolute need for ISRA here. And so we're glad you're out here with us today, kind of talk more about that.
Well, thank you so much again.
Yeah. So speaking of law enforcement, you're former law enforcement.
Yeah. I grew up in a family where, my dad always said that the only real heroes are the guys buried in Normandy and Arlington.
Okay.
And I had an uncle that was a World War II and Korean vet. And so I knew from like 5 years old, I wanted to do something in a uniform.
Yeah.
And as I got older, unsolved mysteries and stuff like that really kind of got my imagination that I wanted to try to figure this out. I hated the idea of crimes going unsolved, and so that was back before you had the internet. You couldn't really research anything. Right. And, my parents wanted me to go to college. I wanted to go to the Army, but I followed what they said because at the time I thought maybe I wanted to be an FBI agent. And at the time, from what I could find, they were taking lawyers, accountants, and teachers.
Right.
And I love history, especially local history. And so I decided, you know what, I'll just become a history teacher for a couple of years, and then I'll start the application process. And, that just, God had a plan.
Yeah.
And that I was doing everything. And then 9/11 happened, and they suspended the hiring. And they said, we don't want guys like you anymore. We're looking for somebody with military intelligence. And so right then and there, I decided, you know what, I'm done with teaching. Right. Finished out the year and then got a job at the Alton Police Department. And then the last 16 years of my career, I was here in Jerseyville. And I loved every second of it. If, I kind of wish that I could go back and do it all over again, but God's got a plan.
That's right.
So
awesome. So in terms of here locally at Jerseyville, what were you involved in more investigation type thing? Were you involved in, traffic and all of the above? What seemed to be where your career ended up being?
The nice thing about a department like Jerseyville
Yeah.
is that you get a chance to do everything.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That if you are working a burglary case, you've got the opportunity that if you want to hand it over to the deputy chief and let him investigate, you can.
Okay.
But if you want to keep going with it, you do.
Okay.
And, I love that. I think probably my second favorite thing about the job,
Yeah.
we're doing interviews, trying
Yes.
to get people to say, yeah, I did this.
Okay.
I found that to be very challenging mentally.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you had all the evidence and you present that to that person and they're guilty and you just want them to say, yeah, I did it. You know? And how do you get them to say that?
Right.
That's the challenge. You're trying to build a rapport within a few minutes, really, and trying to get them to trust you and trust that, saying this is the best thing.
Right.
And so that's what we did. But I was lucky enough that I got into the firearms instructor position.
Okay.
I ended up, because of my nephews being sixth grade and ninth grade at the time, I volunteered to be the school resource officer for a few years.
Okay.
And, that was actually a really good fit. And I really enjoyed the role. It was a lot of fun. But, I tell people all the time that me being a cop was the same as say, like somebody else growing up wanting to play center field for the Yankees.
Yeah.
It was just something I enjoyed every day. The hardest thing I've ever done was give it up and retire, So I loved it. It was a perfect fit for me.
Awesome. And so with the firearm training sounds like you were the trainer here locally for the station?
Well, as one, we always had a couple of them, that we would both get certified.
Okay.
But, I guess I should start with like going to the police academy. I had a firearms instructor. His name was Greg Robinson. And I stood in awe of that guy. I probably followed him around like a schoolgirl with her first crush, but he had been in Delta Force. And I remember the first time we met that guy. I mean, he's got these desert combat boots on and shorts. He's got this belt with a 45, and this Ranger shirt. And I'm like, hey, man, tell me a little bit about you. And he's like, oh, well, I was a Ranger, my first tour, and then I became Special Forces, then I was Delta Force. And I was like, oh, I was in awe of this guy, And so, I really felt like I was totally prepared for life on the street because I spent 40 hours shooting with Greg Robinson. And then once I got out there, I was like, oh, wow, I'm totally unprepared for everything that I'm about ready to do. And so I was the type of guy that I annoyed the chief and deputy chief like crazy because I would sign up, hey, I want to go to this training. I want to go to this class. And, I would take my vacation days and comp time and I would pay my way into stuff. And that was probably the best thing I could do because, you don't get a lot of opportunity being in a small town, being in these small departments to go train with some of the people that I did. And I'm really, really glad that I did. It really opened a lot of doors. One of the things that helped me the most, I think, was not long after starting law enforcement, I went to the NRA annual meetings down in St. Louis.
Okay.
And they had a table for an organization called the United States Practical Shooting Association. And there was a gentleman by the name of Mark Quinn from St. Louis who was manning the table. And Mark and I started talking, and Mark and I have remained friends. But he suggested I try USPSA and, kind of asked me questions, where you from and everything. And I grew up in Carrollton, and he put me in contact with a gentleman by the name of Bill Brock that Bill kind of took me under his wing and started taking me into these USPSA matches and started shooting. And, between going to all these training classes and shooting USPSA, I became a little more vocal about my beliefs in 2A and met a gentleman by the name of James Toll that James was, he had his own radio program And, he sent me an email one time saying, hey, I'm going to have this new TV show. And I was just kind of wanting to know, would you be interested in coming on, being one of our first guests? And I really thought that the guy was just joking with me. I mean, nobody sends you an email like that. And I said, yeah, sure, and maybe a month or two later, he sends me another email, but this has got my flight information and my hotel information. He's like, yeah, you're going to be one of our first 3 guests. And I was very, very fortunate that, James allowed me to be a panelist on a TV show called Stop the Threat for 8 years.
Awesome.
And met some wonderful people, the crew, the host. But then there were 2 other guests that we became really close. Duncan Stewart, the Sarge, and Wes Doss. And, Wes was a tremendous guy, and he saw me shoot and asked if I'd want to go to work for him at his training company. And I was very fortunate that I got to do a lot of traveling with Wes and see a lot of things and work with all these big departments with him. And, then unfortunately, Wes passed away, and I started my own training company. And things were going okay, I thought. I had that. I had my law enforcement career. I just kind of hit a groove where, man, this is just perfect, and I had just gotten married and got diagnosed with cancer and had to retire from the police department and had to give up my training company. But, I'm feeling great. And, Richard Pearson is the executive director of the ISRA, and he'd reached out to me whenever I was sick that, hey, you need to get better because we'd like to use you in some capacity. And so this spring I reached out and said, hey, I'm ready. I feel good. I would like to be on the board of directors. And so just got interviewed and went through the vetting process, and the nominating committee said, hey, we think this guy would be a good fit. And so I'm brand new. I've been to 3 or 4 meetings so far. So, it's challenging, but it's something that I'm passionate about. And I'm ready to be in there and try to help the organization as much as I can.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Wow, what a story. That's amazing. First, congratulations on your health.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I feel great. We are very fortunate that we live where we do, that we've got Siteman Cancer Center.
Okay.
It's a great place.
Wow.
And I'm very, very fortunate that I have a great family doctor, Jim Nanny. So I owe him a lot. Think the world of him.
Yeah. Wow. You never know, right? You never know what direction life's going to go.
Like I said, God has a plan.
That's right.
And he has taken me through some twists and turns that I just had to trust that, hey, you've got this plan and it's in your hands. I learned that nothing I had planned matters. You know?
Right.
Just sit back and enjoy the ride.
Mm-hmm. And now we find you at ISRA.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're an excellent fit.
I hope. I really hope so.
So a little bit more about ISRA. 2A advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on training and focus on competition.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's back into the advocacy last, because that's probably where we're going to end up talking the longest. But so with the competition, we got that's with both, range competition, but also with the youth firearm, the youth trap shoots, correct?
Well, with the ISRA, we have our own range up north. It's a little bit closer to Chicago than it is here.
Okay.
But they have handgun competition, or a combat pistol matches up there. They have the Glock shooting sports. They have precision rifle. They have bullseye pistol leagues, all sorts of stuff. But the bad thing is that you're going to drive 4 hours to get up there. And that's been a challenge. but the opportunities are there. If you're an ISRA member, the opportunities are there to go up there and compete on the weekends. I going back to USPSA, I love that. And I love the people that I've gotten to meet. I often joke that I only have friends because of guns and motorcycles.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that's how I tend to meet a lot of people. But I consider Bill Brock one of my best friends, and I follow the guy around and I pay attention because he is such a great shooter and such a great person. And, he has introduced me to people, at Left Handers Gun Club, there in Loami by Springfield, really got to meet some great people through that. And now I'm following him to Pyasaw Park up in Barrie and get to shoot with him. It's great because now one of the guys on our squad, growing up, he lived down the street, and so getting to know him in that respect, I really enjoyed it. You really make some great friends, and people from all walks of life, are taking part in this. And that's the great thing about the shooting sports, so, ISRA is trying to, sponsor a lot of these leagues. One of my pet projects that I'm trying to work on, I would like to have an Illinois State Rifle Association Combat Pistol Championship. And what I envision is having at least 20 ranges throughout the state have the same course of fire. So they're having like a regional qualifier. I'm going to use Pyasaw Armory down there. I've already talked to Scott Pulaski down there, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, this sounds fun," But have the same course of fire as someone, say, like in Metropolis and someone in Peoria, and the winner would go on to a championship held at the ISRA range. And what I'm hoping for is that the cost to get into this is a 1-year membership. So if you aren't a member already, hey, we're going to get you into the fold. And if you are, then great. You're going to be donating some money to a great cause.
Right.
But yeah, we're looking at doing some things like that. I've discussed maybe having a 22 rifle match because that's a little bit more accessible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
If you've got a Ruger 1022, hey, show up at this range and we're going to have you shooting 25 yards, standing, kneeling, and prone. And, the winner goes on. And that way kind of raise our profile because I think there are a lot of people that are intimidated by shooting matches.
Yeah, I think that it's probably one of those things that once somebody becomes introduced to the idea, then they become more and more and more involved. I think you see similar things with like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Or, different, I guess we could call it a hobby.
Yeah.
That people don't quite understand until they experience it. And then the next thing you know, they're all in.
Yeah. I think I hurt my dad's feelings one time when I told him, because he asked me, he's like, well, what's this like? And I told him, I said, if somebody would have shown me, I could go out and shoot pistols, and have fun like this, and compete, I probably would have been doing this instead of playing basketball in high school.
Right.
Because I was the world's, I'm probably in the top 3 worst basketball players in Carrollton history, So I mainly just sat on the bench, but at least with this, I'm going out and I'm competing, and you have different levels. Yeah. That you're competing against people in your own level. Yeah. And I like that.
Yeah, it levels the playing field.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the WJBM Outdoors Show, brought to you by Midwest Tractor Sales in Jerseyville. We're coming to you from the WJBM studios in Jerseyville, the voice of the Tri-Counties. I'm Aaron Quillen. I operate Monarch Rivers, where the mission is simple: kill big deer. And for those of you just tuning in, our guest, Rich Portwood of the Illinois State Rifle Association, former Jerseyville law officer. And we were just talking about some of the firearm competitions that you've been a part of and some of the aspirations that you have with the ISRA. And, it's interesting. We were talking about how once people get incorporated into, training in a range, that desire to compete, that desire to take it to the next level, sometimes naturally just kind of flows into them. So that being the basis, training, something you're vastly familiar with, what are some of the things that the ISRA, does in terms of promoting this firearms training?
Sure. I think a lot of it starts with the youth programs. I'm sure as a kid, somebody took you aside and said, hey, this is how you are going to safely operate a firearm.
Right.
And, I was very fortunate that I grew up with my dad, taking me hunting squirrels and rabbits and teaching me that safe way of doing things. And that's part of it. But we also have to have some programs for women. And I know that men don't want to hear this, but they also need firearms training. I don't care if it's a cop or who. It just seems like guys have this thing where, I know how to shoot a gun. But there's always a way to do it better. And I think one of the parts that I like about the competition is that I'm never going to be the best. I'm never going to master this, and there's always room for growth. And, with training, I know there are a lot of people out there with their concealed carry, that they shoot maybe once a year. But, if you are learning how to shoot with a flashlight, if somebody breaks into your house, if you're learning how to shoot, if you're out with your wife, how do you protect her if somebody's trying to, assault you or shoot at you? How are you working with that? There's a lot of things that you can train on.
When I got my concealed carry, that was the first time I had done any type of formalized training, and it was awesome. It was a private scenario. A gentleman came to the house, and there were different aspects that I had no idea. Just purely the amount of times we drilled the draw and the important aspects of what would seem simple, but when something's happening fast, it could be really easy to get your firearm caught in your shirt.
Yeah.
So just over exaggerating, the shirt pull to the draw, just those different aspects really opened my eyes to how important some of the training is.
Yeah.
Everybody that, participated in athletics growing up, we understand the purpose of drills. Yeah. So when the time comes, you do it right. But then to just see what some of the very beginner level, because it's the first time I've ever done anything like that in terms of the draw and stuff like that. And just, that was so eye-opening to me. Yeah. And it really made an impact as to, how I view firearms. What is it? Somebody can cover, was it like 24 feet in X amount of seconds? And
I think it's the 21-foot rule, something like that. Yeah.
And just different aspects that are mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't mean to be on a soapbox or anything like that, but I always caution people. I always tell them, I think of those 16-hour concealed carry classes like driver's ed.
Yeah.
That basically they're giving you the rules of the road. This is where you can carry. This is where you can't. And then they take you out and shoot, maybe 32 rounds. And I've seen people that have never shot a handgun before go out and they pass. Well, to me, it's kind of like taking driver's ed and saying, okay, well, now you're ready to drive in the Indianapolis 500. Not quite.
Right.
After you pass that concealed carry class, are you ready to engage in combat with someone? And I think that's a big question. And I really encourage people to seek out training, if at all possible.
Well, I think you just answered a question for me that I've always had and haven't really, I guess, dedicated the time to figure it out. It sounds like I could go to Illinois State Rifle Association, and all of a sudden there's resources there for me to find places to train, find trainers. Anytime I wanted to go, up my level, find a place to practice, find someone that can help me practice in the right way this is a valuable resource to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, anytime that you're going to shoot competition,
Right.
it doesn't matter how bad you are. It's going to be a skill builder. It's going to help you get better at, just your gun handling, being able to do it safely.
Right.
Get out there and shoot. That's what it's about.
And that is interesting to think, because it's almost like firearm safety is almost a cultural aspect, because we do hunter safety as a child typically. And then, like you're saying, you're not ready for the Indy 500, but then over time, kind of through culture or way of life down here, consistently handling firearms, consistently getting better. Yeah. Whether you're in a duck pit, practicing trigger discipline, or just different aspects of, going out hunting with the buddies.
Yeah.
And then to, you get to the level of like a concealed carry. And then, the eye-opening aspect of, oh, wow, train the draw, train, the different, just even the different exercises of going through your pistol in terms of decock, empty the clip, pop the clip, being able to do that without looking at it, being able to do it one-handed, the releasing the action forward. That's you need a callus on your thumb with most modern pistols to pop that until you get used to it. Yeah. And, different aspects. I didn't even understand that, these things existed until I took that training. Yeah. And then, like we're talking about, I had no idea, what my next steps are. So locally, you mentioned Pyasaw. Yeah. There's an armory down there.
Yeah, they've got a range and gun store, and a great place to go in, get out of the heat, and do some shooting. Okay. They've got a really nice facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, when you do trainings, at their facility or various facilities?
What? I actually yesterday when we were texting, that was my first day working down there. Okay. At the range counter. Okay. I think the plan is that eventually I'll do some training classes. Okay. And we're in the works that we're developing some training programs for the Illinois State Rifle Association. And again, I would love to see that where we're traveling around Illinois doing that. Wes Doss, as I mentioned before, guy was one of the smartest people I've ever known. And one of the things he came up with was a program called the Light, Sights, and Laser Tour. Okay. That, it was free training for military and police, and it was all sponsor driven. And we went all over the United States. But that was completely Wes's thought. And I've said I would love to take that idea and apply it to the ISRA. Take businesses like Winchester, Rock River Arms, Springfield Armory, Pro Shot, whatever, get them to sponsor us, and we'll go around and do some concealed carry skill builders at ranges all over the state. That's another one of my goals for the ISRA. Now, whether or not we can pull that off, I don't know, but that's one of my goals.
I like that. That's awesome. Okay, so the third pillar, competition, training, and the third pillar, Second Amendment advocacy. A lot of things going on in Illinois right now. Yeah. What are some of the things that we can do? Any of the listeners or so we can look at Illinois State Rifle Association, and we can join, become a member, and then ISRA, I'm sure, has some type of means of communicating these recent issues or any issues that we're facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give a plug here that we have about 2 million FOID card holders in the state of Illinois. We've only got about 1% of them that are members of the ISRA. And if you look at all the lawsuits that are being filed in Illinois that are challenging these unconstitutional laws that Illinois is passing, the ISRA is the one that's filing them. Okay. You might get Gun Owners of America filing an amicus brief on something, but it's the ISRA that is doing the heavy lifting. And so you've just got a small group, really and truthfully, that paying for all these lawsuits that we are filing everything. The best thing you can do, if you are truly passionate about the Second Amendment, join up.
Right.
We need you. We need you to be part of this. We need you to take part. But once you are a member, they send out a newsletter about every week via email. And, they will give you updates on all of the legislation and the litigation, too, all the court cases that are going on. And then they have a quarterly magazine called the Illinois Shooter that, in my opinion, is one of the best gun magazines out there because it's got a little bit about everything. They've got some hunting stuff, they've got recipes, they've got gun reviews, all sorts of stuff.
Awesome. Okay, so essentially, the heavy lifter behind protecting the Second Amendment, particularly here in Illinois, has 1% of
Basically,
the overall FOID card holders.
Yeah.
Meaning, technically, the legal firearm owners.
Yeah.
Only 1% are members to the group that protects their ability to maintain a firearm.
Yeah. Which is kind of why I wanted to get on here and just kind of advocate for the organization. Great friend of mine who we went to the police academy together. Big gun owner, loves to shoot, loves to collect guns, won't join. And when I asked him why, well, I'm not going to join until they do something about the FOID card. I'm not going to join until they get rid of the assault weapons ban. And I'm like, do you realize that that's really silly? That's like saying that I'm not going to go and help my neighbor put out their fire.
Right.
Until they get the fire under control. It just doesn't make sense to me. We need you. And if you believe that the Second Amendment is important, please sign up and join. We desperately need you.
Okay, excellent. And then we'll circle back and do this again at the end of the program. But what's the best way for someone to look up ISRA? There's a website.
They have a website, isra.org, but they also have a YouTube channel under Illinois State Rifle Association. There's an Instagram page and a Facebook page. Okay.
All right. And then basically by going to any of these medias, you can get pointed to membership and how to join from there. Okay. Now, let's go back to the law enforcement, right? Let's take the ISRA hat off. With your years of experience in law enforcement, you are, we're in Jerseyville, which is a very safe community, but there have been instances where, there was opposition with firearms. Very few people have the perspective of being put in that situation, either military, cops. I don't know how many other situations you're actually in that type of environment where you get that perspective. How has your experience in law enforcement maybe changed the way you think about firearms and the 2A itself? Meaning, you get what I'm saying?
I don't think it's changed it. I think if anything, it has reinforced it. Just because in my experience, it hasn't been, a guy like you, a law-abiding citizen, going out and buying a gun legally, that you're the one going out and committing the crimes.
Right.
Most of the guns are obtained illegally. And I think that's kind of one of my frustrations on the law enforcement side, is that I see all of the legislation that is aimed at limiting you, the normal, everyday, law-abiding citizen, but it doesn't do anything to curb violence. What about the criminal? Instead of saying that, hey, you know what, you're not allowed to own a handgun that holds more than 15 rounds. How about we say that if we catch somebody committing a crime in the possession of a firearm, automatically 10, 15 years, we're locking you away. You don't get a plea deal or nothing. You're going away. Why can't we make it harder for the criminal instead of making it harder for the regular guy?
That's a really good question. I think that both on a national and a state level, we're really kind of seeing that. There's a resistance to Second Amendment right. I think I just saw something maybe earlier today where it's the only, I'm probably saying the wrong word, but it's the only declaration that includes "thou shalt not be infringed" or something like that.
Yeah, but yet people look at it as like that's a privilege and not a right.
Right.
New Mexico's waiting period to purchase a gun was just found unconstitutional about 2 days ago. And that is such a huge issue, because I know that there are people who advocate, well, if you are going through a stressful time and you're trying to purchase a gun because you're going to go out and like kill your soon-to-be ex-wife or whatever, what about the soon-to-be ex-wife? Because if, God forbid, you have a female or someone of lesser stature that they need a firearm in order to protect themselves. And now, well, sorry, but you've got to wait a few days and then come back and get it. In the meantime, they're in jeopardy. It's punishing that law-abiding person.
Right. I lived in Arizona for a period, about 4.5 years. And I got invited on a quail hunt. And I think it was called the Tortilla Mountains, which was down kind of in the middle of the state, halfway between Phoenix and Tucson. And I didn't have a 12 gauge out there. I went to a pawn shop. I bought a Mossberg pump, and I think I came back an hour later and I got the gun. And it was, we are so far from that here.
Oh yeah.
And at what point, sure, people that aren't mentally stable, let's not give them a gun right now. But how do you filter that out?
That's a pretty big issue, and I'm not sure we can sift through all that here.
Right, yeah.
But you start thinking about back, what was it, like the 60s and 70s when they started shutting down mental hospitals and just saying, okay, well, this is just horrible to keep you locked up, and they sent everybody out. Well, then you have all these people living out on the street, and it is very difficult trying to get help, for people, because if they don't want it, and if they aren't actively saying that they're going to kill themselves or somebody else, you can't force help on them. But yet they have mental issues that they could be potentially a danger to other people. How do you filter those out? And maybe that's a little bit above my pay grade, but I would think that we need to make mental health a priority, definitely, and give people the resources. Yeah.
There was definitely a trend in federal funding for those, hospitals or whatever organizations that they were that kept people that were mentally ill, and that trend was defund those, and here we are.
Yeah.
So, all right, on that, we're going to take a break and hear a word from our sponsors. Welcome to the WJBM Outdoor Show, brought to you by Midwest Tractor Sales in Jerseyville. We're coming to you from the WJBM studios in Jerseyville, the voice of the Tri-Counties. I'm Aaron Quillen. I operate Monarch Rivers, where the mission is simple: kill big deer. And for those of you just joining, our guest, Rich Portwood, Illinois State Rifle Association. There's a lot to be said about gun laws in Illinois. We're possibly one of the most mixed up states. It's a very divided issue, based off of someone's personal preference in politics. What are some of the things that you're seeing right now, seeing in the overall environment of 2A and things that are kind of coming downstream that maybe we should become more aware of?
Well, the storage law that just kind of took into effect. We were talking a little bit before we started. I've got 3 teenage daughters at home, and the storage law says that any firearm has to be stored, in a lockable box type thing, gun safe, basically. If someone can have access to it. So, in other words, in my home, I need to keep everything locked away so those girls don't have access to it. But, like I said, there are documented cases where there has been a child, and let's face it, teenagers are still children, that they have successfully defended themselves in their homes because they were taught how to use a firearm and they had access to that firearm within the home. I'm not saying that, my girls need to have a pistol in their bedroom, but if something were to happen and someone break in and attempt to assault them, and they were to take one of my firearms and use it in their defense, then I would be criminally liable. Why penalize us for that? Now, I think that this is kind of a half-hearted attempt to kind of address some of the school shootings where you have had kids who have had documented mental illness and a lot of issues, but they still had access to the firearm. In that case, you would hope that the parent would have better judgment, but it is unfortunately been that parents don't have good judgment, and that's why these kids have had the firearms. But again, why are we not penalizing them? The focus is on the law-abiding citizen right now. Right. You got to hammer the people that are committing the crimes, not the ones who are doing nothing. Right.
Well, and there's relevant data, statistical data that shows in areas where people have open carry rights, there's less crime, and the crimes don't go as far. So why we're kicking around, more gun laws, it doesn't really make sense. I'm really glad that you came in today because just getting, for my own personal benefit, just getting to know more about Illinois State Rifle Association. You ever heard the expression, you want to learn to sail, hang out with sailors?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of sayings like that. This is an absolute opportunity to hang with sailors, gun owners, learn about competition, training, different aspects that, and then again, that's so astounding that 1% of Illinois FOID card holders are currently members of the organization that does the heavy lifting.
We've got to increase that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. A little bit about the organization. How do you guys break down? Where's headquarters, and how does all of that work?
So everything is mainly up near Chicago, and I know that one of the complaints that I've heard from some of my friends, I don't want to join the ISRA because there's nothing for them downstate. Well, if you join, we're going to make sure. Again, I'm working with Scott Pulaski down there at Pyasaw Armory. We're going to try to set up a grassroots meeting to where we can have some of the local politicians come in and we can talk about some of the laws that are on the books and some of the things that are coming out, but also talk about what is the ISRA doing to combat that. I think a lot of people feel like Illinois sees it as just anything below I-80, not worthwhile.
Right.
But that's not the case. The ISRA is trying to spread the message downstate. And like I said, we're trying to work on some programs that we are bringing to you in downstate.
Okay. All right. Yeah. The ways of life are completely different. And I guess I-80 is a pretty good line for that. With the population of 10 million in Chicago and 2.5 downstate, we'll just say roughly, that's 4 times the numbers up there in that concentrated area. But I think overall in a downstate where when we recognize the need for representation, I think that will cause us to, take more initiative, join organizations like State Rifle Association and just like you're saying, purely by becoming a member, you now represent a voice within that organization that covers that geography. The job of an organization such as ISRA is to say, hey, we have members down here. They're jumping around waving their hands, or they have an interesting point here. So like you're saying, chicken versus egg, you got to sign up. You got to plant the seed.
Yeah.
So we greatly appreciate that. If you don't mind, say again how we can follow or get to the ISRA online.
Sure. The website is isra.org, but you can look for Illinois State Rifle Association on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Okay, awesome. And then if anyone wants to come down to Pyasaw Armory and do some shooting.
I hope they do.
Yeah, they'll see you there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So I always put it out on my Facebook page, like, hey, if any of my friends want to come over and dry fire with me, I try to do it every day. I've never had anybody take me up on it.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your Facebook?
I just have a personal page.
Oh, okay.
All right. But I can't get any of my friends to come over and do it.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, thank you again for coming out. We greatly appreciate you spreading the word, and it's been nice to get to know you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Appreciate you.